Welcome back to another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, here today in Goddard, Kentucky at the Goddard Covered Bridge. And I'm joined by Ginny Reeves. Ginny, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming.
So Ginny, what is the significance of this beautiful structure behind us?
Well, there's a historical and tourism and sentimental significance of this covered bridge. The significance is that, people come from all over the world to see this because it's the only Ithiel Town covered bridge in Kentucky and one of the few in the United States.
Now, when you say that, is that the design of the bridge?
Yes, it is. It's a Ithiel Town design. He patented it in 1820.
Okay. Now, can you talk a little bit about the construction of the bridge?
Yes, the construction of the bridge is a lattice design. It's a crisscross, and when you see the other bridges, or like the Howe or the Burr or whatever, but the Ithiel Town is a lattice design, and it's put together with wooden pegs. It doesn't have nails in it.
I was going to ask, no nails, all pegs.
Right, that is true.
Okay, and that's very significant for a covered bridge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And many people have not seen that, where it's all put together with wooden pegs, called tree nails is what they're called. And when they restored it several years ago, for the ones that were missing, they had hand carved up on Pea Ridge. Some guys, his name was By Williams, that carved all the missing tree nails.
Now, you and I were walking through the bridge before this, and you had pointed out a different colored board supporting, was that part of the original structure? Can you talk about that?
Yes. There's a process called sistering, and when you see boards that are a different color than the original poplar, the community wanted to keep those all the original pieces as possible because they have carvings on them and different designs, and they wanted that folk art kept. And so in order to do that, then they put additional boards for support, but we were able to retain the original structure.
Okay. Now, talk a little bit about, you said that there was some masonry done with the stonework, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. The rocks that you see up here were done there is no concrete to hold them together. Mm-hmm. They're done by stone masons, and those guys came from Lexington to finish that work up. The original rocks were done from fields nearby when they did the original structure here in 1930.
Now, there is a church behind here, and there's a cemetery. Can you talk about how that kind of all intertwines with the Goddard Bridge?
Yes. Initially, Joseph Goddard gave the land, 1 acre of land, for the church, and that was in 1824. And that's another reason this church is historically significant, is Joseph Goddard was very influential in the Methodist Episcopal Church, when it was settled in Kentucky, shortly after Kentucky became a state. And so he was influential. He was a trustee in the first Flemingsburg Church, in the New Hope Church, and then after that, he gave the land for the Goddard Episcopal Church.
And fun fact, he is the only, we were talking about his grave earlier.
Yes, he is the only member of his family that is buried there. He's buried in a crypt. It's the oldest grave in the cemetery. There was a debate in the Methodist Church about slavery. And so many of the family left and went to Indiana, some to Switzerland County, Indiana, and some to Rush County. And the ones that went to Rush County built another church and a school and a cemetery very similar to this one.
I see. You and I were also talking earlier. You said, and I'm only noting this because there has been some traffic back and forth. Does this happen daily?
This happens daily. You'll see visitors from all over the world that have come here. We stop and talk to them. You see a gentleman right up there right at the moment taking a video. But this is not uncommon. You see artists that will set up their where they're going to paint. There's paintings, pictures everywhere. You know, it's phenomenal what you see. So it is exciting to see that much. And of course, I collect Goddard Covered Bridge pictures myself. and we call our house the Goddard Bridge home because we have tiles in the kitchen all around, and all of our paintings are of Goddard Bridge by some artist that has painted it.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Ginny, can you talk a little bit about the restoration?
Yes, we've had two major restorations. One of them was by Stockton Bauer in 1968, and his family, his father was the noted restorer in the United States. He had built hundreds of covered bridges, and so we were very fortunate to have him to restore it the first time. The second time was in 2006, and it was by Intech from Kentucky Department of Transportation. However, they were not versed real well in how to restore a historic bridge this old, and so they called in Arnold Grayton from New Hampshire, who is the #1 historian for covered bridges in the United States. So we were very fortunate to have him come to Kentucky and direct how it should be done.
Now, what does a project of that magnitude cost?
This latest restoration cost $1 million. Now, you got to understand, this bridge was numbered and taken apart, and it's totally taken apart and then put back together.
That's okay. Just totally put back
Totally.
as was.
Well, without the pieces that were decayed so bad they couldn't.
Okay.
Yes. And underneath there is called lower chords, and then there's upper chords, and that's what makes the bridge withstand all the weight as people are driving across it. It's a very important piece of a covered bridge. The bridge used to be a mile east of here, and when cars were invented and it was no longer just horse and buggy days, they needed a larger bridge, which you'll see a mile from here. It's a concrete bridge now. And so they moved it to this location. Now, before it was moved, there was a murder in the bridge. A guy from Pea Ridge was just up on the hill, shot and killed a guy right in the bridge, and there was blood on the floor of where he died. So it was quite an ordeal. But then in 1930, when they built this road, that Route 32, that's when they moved the bridge here. And school children, there was a little school over there by the church, and school children were allowed to come over and watch. And my dad was one of them that got to watch it. And so anyway, when they put the bridge across, it replaced a swinging bridge. And so anyway, it fell in the creek. And so people started singing London Bridge is falling down. And so that's why you see this apron over here that makes the connection for you to drive across it. It's called an apron there at the end of the covered part. So yes, it's very significant.
Now, Ginny, the church, when was this church built?
This church was built in 1981. In 1980, there was a major fire. They still don't know what caused the fire. And so they lost everything except the bell that you see over there in a frame. Yeah. And everything else was gone. And so the congregation decided they would build it back as near as possible in the architectural design as the previous one was. And the previous one replaced a log church that was built in 1826. But in 1910, the Methodist movement enhanced. There were a lot of people moving in, and so they needed a larger church. And so they built that church, which was much larger than the one-room log. And so anyway, prior to that, there was a 2-year lapse when Mr. Goddard gave the land, and preachers would just stand up by a tree stump and preach, or they may camp out for the day, or maybe overnight even, when they didn't have a building.
Huh. I guess that's how it was, wasn't it?
That's the way it was in history, yes.
Well, 2 more things with the church really fast. The bell that's there, they didn't put that back up because it had a crack in it, but because that was the only thing that survived, That's why it's still there?
Right, and it was with the old church when it was built. Okay. So they wanted something significant that the previous church had, and that was all they had.
So, Ginny, since you were born here, you were married here, I think you might be able to speak to us on what the community was like and how they used this great, beautiful Goddard covered bridge.
Well, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, it was in high use. Then we had rose tobacco, and tobacco farmers had brought trucks across the bridge. But it was also a family get-together on Saturday night at the country stores. And since many people didn't have cars, they would walk across the bridge and get their groceries for the week at one of the 3 country stores. It was a thriving community at that time. So, and the children from the Goddard School came over and got candy and ice cream and so forth on Friday afternoons. That's the only time in recess they were allowed to come over. But Friday afternoon was a big time.
Well, Ginny, thank you again for having us here. It was so fun to be able to come into Goddard. It was so fun to be able to come in through the covered bridge.
Yes, you're very fortunate to get to travel through the Goddard Bridge because it's the only one in Fleming County that you can drive through. Many of the bridges you can't drive through anymore.
Fun fact, I do feel very blessed for that today. And hey, this has been another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, here today in Goddard, Kentucky with the beautiful Ginny Reeves. Ginny, thank you again for having us.
Thank you for coming.
And remember,
travel slowly and stop often.
Bye for now.